Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unexpected Points. Kevin Cole here. Josh Hermsmeyer here. It's Tuesday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern. Who knows what time it is in Josh's neck of the woods, wherever he
10
is.
a.m.
Montana, supposedly a real state in the United States. How many electoral votes do you have? Do you have going on over there? Is it like 2?
In Idaho? That's a good question.
Oh, Idaho. Sorry, not Montana's even fewer, I would say.
They always go to the GOP, so it doesn't really. I mean, my vote doesn't count here, so I just.
Well, you get at least 2, I think. Right? No, you get at least 3, no matter what, because you get your 2 senators, and you have to have at least 1 person in the House of Representatives. So I think that's how it works. So, it could, you never know. Could be some weird stuff going on up there. Anyway, politics talk. We'll keep that for another time. Plenty of that going on on the timeline.
We have 4.
4. Okay, so you got 2. So you got as equal a number of senators as in the House of Representatives. That's the Electoral College, which will be Tim Walz will destroy that, so we don't have to worry about that going forward.
And one other quick fact: we've gone Republican every year since 1976, which is the earliest for which I have data.
1976. So Reagan was 1980.
Correct.
So then 1976 would have been Carter. Peanuts. Jimmy Carter. You see Jimmy Carter? Actually, sorry, all this politics talk guy, but do you see Jimmy Carter cast his vote the other day?
I saw the tweet where they were saying he did it by mail, and someone said, "God, could you just post a picture of the mailbox instead?" God bless him. The guy is in his dotage, his very late dotage, and it's not a.
Not
a pleasant thing.
Because someone else had posted a picture of him from a number of years back where he still was extremely old, and that was fine because, the picture of him today is like, I don't know if he's all there. Love the guy. I know from a fact, being that I'm married to a member of the enemy, the fake news media, that they did Jimmy Carter obituaries. Those things have been written up, edited, copy edited, ready to go for like the last year. He's just not going. He's supposed to have terminal cancer, and he's just not going anywhere. So, props to Jimmy.
He's a fighter.
He is a fighter. All right. I was gonna say, speaking of fighters, but not really. According to James Winston, maybe. But not really. We could start with some Deshaun Watson talk from what went on, because I thought you brought a pretty unique perspective to that. And then we'll get into some more issues of week 7 and so on, maybe check in the chat to see what people are saying there. But why don't we start here with Watson, because I think you made a prophetic point in prior episodes as to why the Browns may have continuing to throw him out there despite the results. Maybe it wasn't just this sunk cost fallacy that a lot of people thought they had. Maybe it wasn't just their belief that we would somehow get a better Deshaun Watson going forward, but maybe it had something to do with an insurance policy that they have on him. Do you want to explain your thesis and how they will, benefit in a way from his season-ending Achilles injury?
Well, what's interesting about the insurance is that reporting earlier this year, at the very beginning of the year, a reporter at ESPN, I'm sorry I'm blanking on her name. She deserves a lot of credit. I have it here.
It's Kaylin Collar?
Kaylin Collar. Yeah, good. Yeah. She did some incredible reporting, and the amount of shoe leather she had to expend to get all of this data on I think she had to talk to every single team. Every single person, a decision maker on the team who had knowledge of their insurance premiums and how much they were insuring their quarterbacks for to get these numbers. I don't think, and I'm unsure if her sourcing came from the insurance companies themselves. I think they have non-disclosure agreements, or at least.
Yeah, presumably they do. Yeah, I mean, obviously these teams don't have to give her the information also.
Correct. And so the amount of information he had was impressive, and it was pretty comprehensive. So I just want to preface all this by saying that's where the information came from. Early in the season, there was this article written on ESPN about insurance premiums.
I have it up on the screen for those tuning in via YouTube if you want to see it. Not that you can get a lot from it, but whatever. Here's the article.
But really, the key kind of team building aspect of this was that she was reporting on something that was kind of an open secret in front offices, which is that under the CBA, there is an affordance for cap to be relieved for every dollar that insurance pays towards an injured player. So if you insure a quarterback for 20 million and he has 20 million left in terms of weekly paychecks, then you can take off of your cap. Now, the question, let me finish my sentence. You can take off your cap that 20 million at some point. The question I have is when, right? There's certain things that aren't really clear. Do you have to actually have lost or the insurance have paid that weekly salary before you can then take it off your cap? So is that a weekly, as the weeks go by, your cap freeze, or do you get it all at once? These are kind of questions I don't know. And then the other thing it turns out is that I guess it was Jason at Over the Cap. He tweeted soon after the injury that an insider had told him that there was only 20 million or just under 20 million worth of insurance this year on Watson. And if that's the case, it's kind of de minimis. I mean, there's not a lot they're going to be able to do in terms of replacing him with, say, another quarterback. Still helpful. But he did say, though, that next year Watson is completely insured. Anyway, lots of conflicting information. The thesis you referred to is not one I actually put forth on the air. I thought it was kind of untoward, to be honest. A little.
Maybe I saw it on the Twitter.
Yeah, I put it out on Twitter afterwards. Kind of just alluded to it in a couple conversations. I actually tried to get you last week to mention it because it's just to accuse.
You didn't realize how dense. You didn't realize how dense of a person you're dealing with there. I was like, I have no clue what you're talking about. More conspiracy theories. I was going.
No, I was saying maybe they have something against him. Maybe they'll keep on throwing him out there because retribution. Yeah. But like, I think there is a world where the people in the front office and in the owner's suite were kind of hoping for this to happen. And I'm not saying it is true, but I think there is a universe where that was true, and that was kind of one of the things I was talking about online. Anyway, it's kind of a very, very ugly thing to accuse a team of, and that's why I kind of avoided it. But hey, the injury occurred. I'm sure somewhere deep inside in the owner's office there were some fist pumps because that's an expensive.
What about fist pumps? I'll say there were no fist pumps. I'll say that. Maybe mental, you're saying, or
mental,
or like that Larry David thing where he's like, on this side, yeah, but well, we do. He gets a little insurance money there.
Yeah. So anyway, it is probably the optimal path through the forces. Another thing we talked about last week with the Browns, like they're really good at somehow finding the optimal path through a shitty situation. Well, they've done it again. This is the very best outcome for them with this Watson situation after giving him a guaranteed contract.
Now, a couple things just about the whole insurance angle, just to reprise this, because I think we may have talked about it already on a prior episode, is that the reason it's seen as a bit of a loophole, if you will, is that or gaming the system is maybe a better way of talking about it, is that you're paying pretty exorbitant premiums, it sounds like, based upon whatever sort of reasonable, not actuarial tables, but whatever sort of injury rate tables that you're assuming based upon this. But the premiums don't count against the cap. So you're paying money for this protection. You either have no effect on the cap if no injury happens, or if an injury happens, you get money back. So from a cap perspective, at least, not from a cash perspective, from an ownership cash perspective, but from a cap perspective, it's a no-lose situation for these teams. And that's why, others, including the Browns, on. And now there is a table in this article. So I'll bring this up a little bit. I don't know how accurate these numbers are. Like you're saying, we've gotten some more information on the lack of accuracy potentially on some of this, but it does say 2024 insured for Deshaun Watson at 58 million. I guess you said you're hearing 20 million. Maybe that's the case. I think for an Achilles, who knows how long he could be out. I think this could also be perhaps part of the rehabilitation / whatever of this thing would be like, you can take your time and you don't necessarily need to see the field if we're going to recoup this money next season, additional money next season based upon that. Maybe it's part of it. But leaning into your other idea of maybe continuing to start Watson because he was so bad, that would go forward. I mean, they almost seem like they were they were revealing themselves as doing this somewhat. The fact that they had Dorian Thompson Robinson as the, I'll just say DTR because I'm not gonna say that again, as the backup who, came in and kind of stunk. And then when he got injured, they brought in the insurance quarterback, Jameis, who we were making the point of is, he's not that bad. He could probably give you league averages sort of quarterback with some upside and a high variance in the way he plays. He led them right down the field and scored a touchdown when he was in the game. What do you do going forward? Because it sounds like DTR may be out for a little bit. Are they making their move by signing Bailey Zappi off of the practice squad to now insert him into the starting lineup to continue the tank for the rest of the season? Because I do think we've hit the point now, despite the fact that I have confidence in Jameis Winston giving you maybe slightly above average quarterback play, there's not enough things that can go right, I don't think, the rest of the season to make the playoffs at this point. So how do you think they should approach it? Because if they don't start Winston, I think everyone's really going to be scratching their head as far as what's going on, because they don't even have another quarterback who hasn't just joined the roster this week.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense that Winston was the emergency quarterback. I mean, props to Cleveland for actually having an emergency quarterback. I mean, like 40% of the league doesn't even do that. So I'll give him credit for that. But it was a head scratcher. I mean, people were speculating perhaps he was going to be traded. And so they wanted to keep him healthy. Like, they were worried about Winston, but anyway, very strange. It seemed to me like the tank was on. I think I texted you that. The other interesting thing to me, though, is that if they do start Winston, I think the tank fails. I really do. I think he's good enough to win you, well, just like Flacco was last year. I think he's good enough to win you enough games that you're no longer looking at a top 8 pick. And so it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Well, okay. Top 8, maybe, but I agree, because that was kind of my point the other day, was like, for the tank to truly be effective, you got to get up into the top few picks, because those are the ones that may be under any circumstance you could not trade into.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in this upcoming season this upcoming draft, there aren't a lot of highly rated quarterbacks. So I'm seeing a lot of what I saw the running back out of Boise State, Janty, going at 10 in mock drafts from the 33rd team. I mean, it's crazy stuff. So you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. I think a top 10 pick, a top 8 pick will get you a quarterback this upcoming season.
Yeah, I'm not very plugged into what's going on, but yeah, I guess that's the case.
But the question I have for you, or at least it was on the top of my head. Oh yeah. So I mean, what? No, I've lost it. You
did a convincing job of pretending that you still had it. All right.
I know. Well, I thought it would come to me, but it didn't. It was related to Watson, though.
I mean, okay. This is the question, right? And I don't even know. I haven't even thought about it. We probably need Jason on here plus a team of capologists to figure this out. But it's just like, he still has a fully guaranteed contract, right, for Deshaun Watson. So
okay, I've remembered.
Okay, it's related to that. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Okay, so here it is. So, do you just go into the training room with Watson next year and you go, "We're not starting you, Deshaun. We're not starting you," and then walk away, and then you walk out, right? That's all you have to say. You're not starting. And then if you're Watson, do you just stay injured? I mean, that to me is the best possible outcome for all parties.
It would depend, I think, and I really do not understand the dynamics of these things, because it would depend on whether or not Watson believes that he could start somewhere else, maybe, or something like that.
I think that's exactly the factor, right?
And then he's saying, okay, well, if you guys are done with me, that's one thing, but I'm not just going to sit around here twiddling my thumbs. Like, I would rather figure out something to get me to somewhere else. Now, how you accomplish that with the fully guaranteed contract and the nature of that and the 70-something million dollar cap hits that are coming in successive years, obviously there would be a huge restructuring as any part of the deal, probably no matter what's going on. But I don't know. Like, I don't know. Is there any chicanery that can go on here from these NFL front offices to figure out how to get out of this thing? Are they going to be
All right.
hiring their own private investigators to get more cases against this guy to somehow get out of this? I
No,
don't know
you
what
just
they're going
leave
to be doing, but it looks
you leave
bad.
that
And I've
to
seen
the
people say
insurance
he's played his
company.
last NFL snap. They said, oh, he's played his last NFL snap. I don't know. Maybe someone else will take a shot on him later on. I don't even know what's going on. I guess I'm not even fully convinced of that being the case as long as the cost is low enough.
So here's a follow-up question. If Watson is wanting to continue to play, do you trade him like they traded for Osweiler? In other words, do you give up, say, a first, maybe at the end of next year? So that means, and you probably have to eat the void year money, which I think is 20 million. So that's still 70 million in cap. So you send him in a first for like a seventh in return to make the trade valid. And then you are I still don't think that works out in terms of the surplus value of a first. I don't think it's 70 million over 4 years even comes close. But if I'll put it to you this way, if you're, say, a team with lots of cap next 2 years from now, going into 2026, will you take a first round pick to have Deshaun on your team, not starting, and 70 million off the books in cap? Is that something you'd entertain?
I don't think that sounds like a bridge too far just because of the PR problems. And again, Deshaun Watson's going to want to play wherever he goes. So I don't see why he would. I mean, he doesn't have. Well, does he have a no trade? I don't even know. Does he have?
He might.
Maybe he has.
He might.
Maybe he does. But I was gonna say, even if you don't technically have a no trade clause, like you have leverage in that sort of situation to make a stink or do whatever. I mean, let's not forget that Osweiler, he might have started for the Browns if not for the fact that somehow Deshaun Kaiser looked good enough in a couple of preseason games that they ended up rolling him out there, and then it was a disaster and everything else going forward. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do. I think they're in a world of pain for a while, even in the NFL. And I see the NFL as a place where you can get out of you can dig yourself out of some situations that are pretty bad pretty quickly. There's only been certain situations, maybe the Falcons, like post Dimitrov, and some other situations where it took a couple of years to dig out from there. But this could be a bad one. So I guess this is another question here, and I've seen this before, is with Amari Cooper already having left, where he was not playing well though. He stunk anyway. Now there's a little bit swirling news about what they might do with Myles Garrett, who I don't think they can even afford to get rid of him because of cap situations. Like they take so much of a dead hit. But do you look to just completely sell off everything that's not nailed down, maybe even some things that are nailed down, get the old hammer out, take it, get them unnailed down and get them out of here as part of this eventual move to get rid of Deshaun Watson, be able to absorb that cap hit next year or sometime in the future.
How old is Garrett?
Turns 29, I think, in December. I looked it up earlier. So yeah, I mean, I saw
crazy that he's already 29. It seems like
I saw I looked up Garrett Wilson showed up here instead. I saw someone, and I never know like how crazy the offers might actually be, but like everyone on every media and he turns 29 on December 29th. So every media analyst on Twitter when you talk about trading for someone, they're like, oh, I would trade 7 firsts and 16 seconds for Myles Garrett just because of how good he is. Where guys like us who do to strip all the joy out of football and calculating all of these different things, we're saying, and this is how I look at it, you say, if your prime lasts from 25 to 31, maybe 32, and every year that you're losing, you're losing like a significant chunk of your probable prime. You're losing like 25% of your prime every single year that goes by here. There's just not that much left of the prime at this point. So I guess I'd be a little bit surprised if anyone coughed up that much, but maybe you put the feelers out there to see if you can get a team in mid-season shoving all the chips in type of mode, I would entertain it because again, he's getting pretty old. So if you're saying this experiment is done with Deshaun Watson, we're going to be in the tank for a year or two, he's not really useful to the Browns anyway.
Would you accept maybe a second and a third for him?
No, I would need a first. Like I would say someone will give you a first. I'll give you that because it's going to be a team that's going to be picking at the end of the round, all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I'd take a first and a second or something like that. I presume that's something I could get. I'm just saying I saw people say multiple firsts and multiple seconds, and I guess I mean, if they're willing to give it to you, I would, I would jump at it, but I don't know how you even restructure things and how you figure it out with this contract. And again, the Browns have pushed a lot of chips in already. It just depends on what you can end up getting back. I mean, I think the Browns should be exploring all these different options now because for me, it's over. It's over for them for the next year and a half, probably, for what they're going to be able to do as a franchise.
Yeah, no, I don't see any way out. They're well and truly fucked. They cannot build a team with that salary to Watson and him not on the field. I mean, they can't win with him on the field either. I mean, that's the problem, right? There's just no, other than this insurance and then a potential trade, and then you lose a pick, which hurts you down in the long run as well, or at least in the medium term. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way to really right this. So,
I mean, unfortunately for Garrett, he's already mentioned something. Probably should keep his mouth shut a little bit here. A few weeks ago, I don't know if that was him or the team, about the fact that his feet are all messed up. He might need surgery on his feet.
right.
So, like, that's not good. That's also not exactly upping your value to say we're gonna take on this 29-year-old, soon to be 29-year-old who has a lot of miles. There's a lot of miles on that body, and bad feet. Feet sound important as part of the role.
You would think as a football player. Yeah.
That's
Speaking of feet, that poor Chris Godwin. So I know that there are people out there who want to.
Okay, so let's flip over. Are we going to talk Bulls criticism on Godwin here?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I mean, how do you buy this that they were completely out of this game, 10 down with about a minute left? They'd already gotten one onside kick, so probability is they won't get another. I mean, there's been 2 all year, and they had one of them in that game. So the chances are here you don't win. So do you just lose with grace, or is this one of those cases where you get mad at the team if they're not trying to win all the time, right? And do you actually lose the team a little bit if you just kind of tip your queen with time on the clock and stop trying, under the auspice of, I want to protect the players? I don't know. I guess I find it hard to fault him, Bulls I'm talking about, for continuing to call plays or allowing plays to be called down the field to try and score points. I don't think it's that bad a thing.
Yeah, you know what's weird about their roster is like Mike Evans out, Godwin out. I mean, they have a couple other dudes on IR. Like they don't have a lot going on at wide receiver. So here's my take on it. I think if we step back from this particular situation, I think there has been a problem, a miscalculation, a miscalibration of this idea that you play till the very end unless it's so far out of hand. Like until you get to the point where it's theoretically impossible to win, then you start taking out some starters. And that's kind of what they do in the NFL. Whether the win probability is telling you in the middle of the fourth quarter that you have 0.1% chance to win, if it's like within 3 scores or something like that, the starters are playing. That's just the way that it works in the NFL, the way it's going to work. The rosters are fairly thin. So I think there's like a systemic problem or miscalculation by teams that don't look to do that enough. They should particularly be looking at players who get injured a lot. Now, it looks like it was one of these hip drop tackles with Godwin, so it wasn't like a soft tissue injury or something else. That he's had some injury problems in the past, but this looked to be more random than anything like that.
Wow. Well, hip drop is not random. Roquan's now my least favorite player in the NFL. He's a new enemy.
Well, I'm saying
it's
not connected to Godwin, at least. It's not connected to his like injury proneness or lack thereof. So I would say as a macro issue, I think it's an example you can use to maybe push an agenda that I would like to do. But I personally can't do that because everyone just goes overboard with these things. And of course, like probably 31 or other coaches do the same exact thing in this circumstance. So it's a little bit hard to fault him, I think.
Yeah. Okay. We're on the same page. I guess my frustration is the hip drop. If this turns out to be a hip drop tackle, it's a really hard angle to tell
I mean, I
the
think it
view.
was. I think it was. Something had to have pinned the. I mean, it's a similar type of injury to what we've seen with these hip drop tackles in the past, where they say a dislocated ankle when you break you break the bones basically to allow the dislocation in that area. I think that's exactly what happened to. Trying to think of who it was. It was a running back in the playoffs. Same exact thing happened. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when I watched it live and I rewatched the ones that Schefter tweeted out after he reported that the league was investigating it, it was just Roquan came in from the side that was blocked by Godwin's body. It's tough to tell from that angle. And again,
You want
I
to make
haven't
sure he
watched.
wasn't going to pick up that 3rd and 15. He could only allow 14 yards, and that's why they do the hip drop, right? Is to not allow them to fall forward and to get an extra yard or two. I mean, that's why you're like as a defender, you're just like instinctually you're trying to do that is to keep them from getting that 1 or 2 extra yards.
I think that might be true, but I also believe someone was making the point. I believe it was Ben Gretsch that this is a relatively recent technique, and it's traced back to I think rugby, and even rugby it's recent, and they've done a pretty good job of banning it in that sport. And so it's not actually something
I
that
don't know if it is recent. I mean, I know rugby has outlawed it somewhat recently. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think I don't think it's a widespread tackling maneuver. I don't, and I don't think that it's something that was actually practiced all too terribly much in
But
the
I think
past.
it's less of a deal in rugby, and I mean, this is I don't know. I know nothing about rugby. Let me state that. But my understanding is you don't have like yard markers over and over and over and over again. You have to where the delta is. You get past this yard marker, you get 1 extra yard, and you get a new set of downs. Versus like maybe you'd want to hip drop. You really need to hip drop someone right before you get into whatever the equivalent is of their end zone. But if as long as you take them down, and it's to take down a big player too. Like if you have a size disadvantage, I think it helps also to take someone down. But they don't have the same concerns of like allowing an extra yard or two in the middle of the field. I think I don't know.
That might be true. I guess what I'm speaking to is the idea that this is a key part of how defenses attack the offense, and the only one of the only ways that they're going to be able to tackle these guys. And I just think that's untrue. We've seen plenty of good defense this year with the rule in place. I wish that we still had fewer of these things. I think it's a shame. We've lost so many wide receivers this year. Like, I think we've lost more wide receivers than we have running backs, top end wide receivers versus top end running backs. And I mean,
More of them are out there. So yeah.
back in 2015, I did a study that showed that, well, at least based on the data we had in the past 10 years leading up to 2015, that there was no world, there was no universe based on that set of data in which the serious injury rate for a wide receiver as a class of players would ever reach the serious injury rate of running backs. And I think this year it's going to absolutely eclipse it. And I think that's crazy. So yeah, any way we can make this a little safer for our wide receivers out there, and as well as our quarterbacks, I think the better.
Well, the question is how much the like post hoc fines are actually having an effect. So like they're not penalizing anyone for these, and I think that would have a larger effect if you were, but maybe it's very difficult to adjudicate in the moment. All we're seeing are fines after the fact. So Roquan Smith will probably get the standard. What are these? Always these random numbers. Always like $11,437 fine or after the fact. Whether that has any deterrent effect, I'm not quite sure. I think a penalty in game would have a larger deterrent effect, especially if it came in an important situation. It would be on everyone's radar as opposed to a footnote than the following week. But maybe straight cold cash homie has an effect also.
Yeah, I think I knew at one point how they determined those fines had something to do with their paycheck as a percentage or something like that. So it may actually hurt Roquan quite a bit because I think he's paid a hefty amount each week. So I don't know. Hopefully, I just let's stop hip drops. It's just, you don't need to do it, man. And one of the
Let's
things I
drop the hip
saw,
drops.
one of
Let's
the things I
drop.
saw in the same game that Troy Aikman was all upset about, Kyle Hamilton laying a lick on Kate Otten, and it was all shoulder. It was a perfect form tackle, shoulder to shoulder, no helmet, and they were ready to. I mean, Aikman was ready to throw a flag.
Did
I
he
think you
launch
watched.
himself though? Was he
Oh, he
launching?
launched himself, absolutely, but it was to the shoulder.
I
It was
think there might be an
completely.
anti-launching rule or something also, but I
No,
don't know what's going on.
I think it's launching with head. He didn't use his head; he used his shoulder. I mean, if you can't launch with your shoulder, then literally we've taken tackling out of football. So no, I think Kyle Hamilton showed you can still hit and hit hard legally. It's just these guys are really skilled at what they do. They just need to learn and figure out the right way to do it so that there are fewer head injuries and fewer, disgusting dislocated ankles in the game. I think we need to. I like seeing good players play. That's all I'm saying.
All right, moving on to another injury topic, because let's just get it all out of the way here. The social media fodder for this one too. So Tua Tagovailoa is going to be back on the field this Sunday. Check out my power rankings where they actually move up quite a bit. Their defense has been okay. Like it's weird how Tua doesn't get as much credit as maybe some others might be for backups coming in and being horrifically awful, proving his bona fides. But anyway, so Tua's coming back. My opinion on the whole thing has been, yeah, it's dangerous, more dangerous for Tua versus others, but then also the baseline rates of concussions and potential brain injuries are very high across the board. So, everything we apply to Tua, we can apply to other people to a lesser degree and think about it that way. Now, of course, that's not how these things work out, right? It's similar to the Todd Bowles discussion with resting players. Like everyone to a certain degree could probably be moving in a certain direction, but when you have one person, then everything gets piled onto them. So here, Tua, everything is getting piled onto him here. The latest thing was that he said he didn't want to wear the Guardian cap, which if people seen, it's when they got that extra foam Tupperware on the head where it does look laughably big from certain angles, but hell, I don't care. Because of comfort, I think he said. No, did he say comfort or did he say he didn't say style, but I think that's how some people were interpreting it, was that he just wasn't comfortable. And I'm kind of okay with it because I think the research is pretty inconclusive on how much it helps. And it sounds like it would be good for subconcussive hits, like linemen bouncing into each other over and over again, more so than for the one catastrophic hit that a quarterback might end up taking. I'm not sure it actually ends up helping that much. So I don't think it's that big of a deal, but of course it gave fodder to the people that are, Tua needs to retire yesterday type of people.
Yeah, I think the studies have shown it's the turf that matters more than the helmet. The helmet can do that subconcussive protection, like you mentioned, for the linemen. I think all linemen should wear the Guardian helmet or something
They wear
similar.
them during training camp, I think. I think the linemen all wear them during training camp.
Yeah, and the new helmets for the linemen, if you look at them, they're kind of bigger in the front, so there is a little bit more padding in the updated modern helmet for linemen and for defensive linemen as well. If you look at Nick Bosa now, he's wearing one that has a kind of a bigger brow coming off the front of the helmet, but not quite the Oompa Loompa kind of mushroom man look that you get from the Guardian. I'm with you.
It's
I
been the
don't.
back of the head sometimes too, right? A couple of his were the back of the head, so that wouldn't help necessarily. Again, you're saying it's the turf, the ground causes it more than anything else.
The turf, and then how you hit, right? So if you can't brace yourself with your arms and your head snaps back and hits the ground with force, you're going to get concussed. I mean, unless you're in bubble wrap. The Guardian might help in those situations. I don't know, but yeah, mostly the turf. It needs to be forgiving. I think the thing that the people got upset about, or at least I saw some tweets that were upset, kind of incredulous, were that he said, "I love this game to my death," right? And I think that's something you say to your guys in the locker room. I don't know how well that plays to the general public. I think that kind of it brings the ick factor front and center about the gladiatorial nature of football, and I don't think the majority of football fans really want to think about their sport that way. For him to throw it all the way out there, I mean, that might be his truth, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe you want to reconsider how you phrase those things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's why you have like the quote unquote independent people helping make these decisions, however much you want to think that that's credulous or not. I guess I didn't see that, so I do think there was at least some. Again, it's just like a reflexive sort of thing. They're seeing Tua say, whatever, I'm not comfortable wearing it, and they're just like, well, why not? That's the whole thing. The whole thing is why not? If even if it has no benefits, why not? It's like I can't get. I was going to make some COVID reference, but I can't go there. I'm not going to go too political or anything. But it's like the why not
You
philosophy when
can't
it
help
comes to a lot
yourself.
of
You
these.
want to you want to have a politics podcast so bad. I can tell.
Well, I actually didn't mind some of the masking stuff in certain situations because it was a why not, even if it was um, uh, probably pretty worthless. But in this situation, like you don't want to be wearing this thing on your head if you don't want it, and you're a quarterback and you're turning your head around and this and that. That seems a bit much to me. So anyway, yeah. So it seems like we're on the same page there. Guardian caps. I do think like instituting a rule where offensive linemen or defensive linemen wear them could be interesting. Offensive linemen probably would be more open to doing so because they're not worried about speed or coming around the edge and doing those sorts of things or having to go into coverage and doing stuff like that much. But we have seen linebackers and others wearing them too, which is
I think it
interesting
would.
because
Well, there's a huge benefit. I think that extra 2 inches, if you have a tall quarterback, can make it harder for the defensive lineman in front of you to know when the throw is occurring. You saw some really kind of important passes batted down this week, and I think so. It could help in that regard. But then on
does
the
it make
other
it
end,
harder for your own quarterback though?
if you have Bryce Young or whomever, then yeah, your lanes need to be formed by splitting linemen apart and actually creating lanes
What if
line.
you're a tackle and the rule is like the illegal formations that were going on at the time? The rule is that your helmet has to breach the belt line of the
Oh
center.
yeah,
So that's why they're so what if you put like 6 of these things on and you're just way back and then you just lean forward and all of a sudden you're good to go and you have
I
like an
love
extra
this.
step as an
I
advantage.
love
What do you
that.
think about that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, to get your tackles in there, and so they give them an
Like all
extra
those
inch
guys should
and a
have
half,
it.
2 inches.
Every tackle should have one of these things on just to if it prevents like a couple illegal formation calls a season, I think it's worth whatever sort of discomfort we have there.
No, I think that's super sharp. I love it.
Okay, we solved that one there. Okay, let's get into some actual stuff that's going on that's not the injury related stuff. I think the number one team I want to talk about is the 49ers because I don't know. Film guys are going to film guy. Film hipsters are going to film hipster. They're going to tell us about what's going wrong because something's going wrong because they're not playing well. So clearly there's like something going wrong. There's going to be a lot of tension here because Purdy is making mistakes last week, but generally not making mistakes. He's throwing into a lot of tight windows. There's some talk. I hear some chatter, a little bit of chattering out there about maybe is Shanahan getting solved a bit, but yet it's tough to do because he's reached God tier in a lot of people's minds and can't be given that sort of criticism. What do you have any opinions about what's going on here or how we should digest the opinions that we're going to hear out there, more importantly, about how done the 49ers are or not? Because if you look into the old the cold-blooded betting markets right now, I
Yeah.
think they still have the third highest Super Bowl odds in the NFL, despite the fact that they're 3-4 right now.
Well, we talked last week about unpredictable and how it's weird going in on Tuesdays, but they have them as the 6th best team in the league now after that with a huge drop of 1.6 points on a neutral field. That's pretty large. I'm sure it'll rebound on tomorrow on Wednesday, as we always see.
Well, I mean, part of that, like the difference between Super Bowl and maybe that is like Debo is probably not going to play right because he has some sort of pneumonia sort of thing. Obviously, Ayuk's out, but he's not coming back. So Debo will be back at some point. Christian McCaffrey, I guess he's getting the stem cells of young Eastern European boys injected into his Achilles or whatever's going on there. So maybe he'll be back at some point. I mean, for what it's worth, they're down to 5th in my power rankings right now. So I see some of that there. So, but I think that the difference between like a power ranking might be about right, 5th or 6th for the next couple of weeks. They may assume they're going to kind of get healthier and some better things happening by the end of the season,
right,
relative to the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, or some probability that Pearsall is the guy that they drafted him to be, an older wide receiver is ready to step in and play. Ayuk loved him. They played together. I
Every
think
time I
he
see a picture of that guy, I think it's Harrison Butker. Do you know that? He looks they're like they look exactly the same to me, but then again, I'm not good. Go ahead.
okay. Well, yeah, you see, again,
Back to politics.
you
Sorry,
want
more
a politics
politics talk.
podcast so bad. I swear. I saw a tweet from Grant Cohn, so
Oh yeah.
he's good for fire takes.
Measured, one of the more measured observers out there.
Yeah. Yeah, he says Kyle Shanahan just lectured Brock Purdy for 5 minutes at his locker. Purdy listened and said nothing. Never seen anything like it. Someone
Wait, he was the one. He's like, is he
he hates Purdy.
anti-Shanahan? Is
He
he
hates
anti-Shanahan?
Purdy, but he's
Oh,
equal
he's Purdy.
opportunity.
I thought he was like Shanahan might deserve to be fired a few years ago, and everyone
Oh,
like
sure.
jumped all over him after that,
No,
right?
but both things
Is
can be
he
true.
anti-everyone on the 49ers? He's kind of like a heel, right? Like, is that his whole shtick?
He liked Darnold, so he has been spiking the
Oh,
football over Darnold's performance a
oh,
little
okay,
bit. He
okay.
thought Darnold should start over Purdy. He thought that Trey Lance was the guy.
I mean, he had some whole thing with Kinlaw. He had a bunch of different stuff going. He had a
Yeah,
lot of beef.
he does have beefs. And look, here's the thing: and a lot of people on the team don't like him, and that makes me respect him because so much of this stuff is access journalism crap. And he continues to go out there. He continues to go in and ask his questions and go to the locker room. So he continues to show face, and they clown his ass. And they say, I think Juszczyk said something about the new PR rules, and he said, "Well, I
Oh
can't
yeah,
have."
yeah, yeah. That kind of went under the radar. The fact that gave a lot of people opportunity to take shots at the reporters for trying to sneak a peek.
Yeah, stand
Essentially,
awkwardly and meat watch. But I think all that is funny and fair game. I'm glad that players have like an outlet to kind of clown on reporters because it's so one sided. But
yeah.
I just wanted to finish with this. David Lombardi said after his presser, Kyle Shanahan stopped by Brock Purdy's locker. The two had a prolonged chat, ended with a big handshake. So you have two different views on this interaction at Brock's locker. But I want to bring this back to football, and it's this. There are film watchers, right, who aren't the hipsters, who look at Kyle Shanahan's scheme, his drop back scheme in particular, and think it's been lacking for years and years and years. That he's got his outside zone game and everything runs off that. But if it's not a bootleg, if it's not a play action, if it's the drop back game, either under center or out of shotgun, it is subpar. It is just not something that people would consider elite in any way, shape, or form. And Brock Purdy has been kind of putting a Band-Aid over that for the past few weeks.
Purdy is elevating Shanahan. He's
Well,
carrying Shanahan. I like this.
because of his ability to scramble and because
Yes.
he's been willing to throw into tight windows this year relative to previous years. Now, is he good enough to do that continually? And that was the question, right? And that's what the film hipsters are saying. We don't think he's that guy, right? He can't continue. But I would argue no one can. Why don't you get a better goddamn scheme? Like, why don't you step up your game, Kyle, with your drop back scheme and go ahead and morph that into something you can win with Purdy rather than relying on outside zone and the easy buttons that come off that. So I don't know. I think the real problem here is that the sharp film watchers, guys, again, I will plug my guy, JT
I
O'Sullivan.
was just gonna say, I was shocked that you didn't already take that opportunity to
Yeah,
plug.
JT
That
O'Sullivan. He's
paycheck's
been
still
on this
coming in.
train. He's been on this train all year. He's all the drop back passing game is shit. And so yeah, no, I would say do better there. And I think you'll probably get better results with a serviceable, high, better than average quarterback in the National Football League in Brock Purdy.
I mean, when I look at these things, I guess my default is always going to be, well, there's like noise for everything that goes on. If you look at how Purdy's performed this year, he had a very slightly negative EPA game in week 2 in Minnesota. Minnesota's a good defense. Some things went wrong. He had a couple of really, really strong games. And if you think about it, 4 out of the 7 starts so far this year, he's put up at least 0.25 EPA per play. So that's like, MVP adjacent type of number. Now, of course, you pick out the good. There's always ups and downs. So you can't always. But the point is, he's just had one slightly negative game, the slightest bit negative, one truly negative game. Now, the most of the focus is on the truly negative game being the marquee game, being the game against San Francisco. But also those negatives are also turnover related, which I don't I'm less concerned about, I guess. Like if you were having multiple negative games with few turnovers, that means your passing game is just like is not working at all in any sort of way, shape, or form. When you have a big turnover game and you're having negative, well, at least that explains to some of like there were some plays that were being made down the field. They had to make a lot of adjustments with Ayuk getting injured and then Debo Samuel, not playing. You guys can check out the footage of him. It looks like he's got a little paunch work. So that was circulating on Twitter. So I like that some people think he's just out of shape. Anyway, I guess my larger thing is I'm still not panicking. But the thing that concerns me the most, regardless of all this stuff, is the fact that he's doing it differently. And maybe that's a feather in Purdy's cap that he is not getting the yak, that he is throwing into tight windows, that he is scrambling a lot, like you say. Like that, those are all bolsters. That all bolsters maybe my opinion of Purdy, but it doesn't bolster my opinion of the reliability of his efficiency and production going forward if he doesn't have those easy buttons that he had in the past.
Yeah, agree. And so I was joking around on Twitter and I kind of, I adjusted Purdy, right? And I posted the EPA per play for all the quarterbacks who had, I think, over 100 attempts and or dropbacks. And what I did was I made a Shanahan adjustment. And the only way I could get him down to 15th on the list was to give Kyle 90% of his EPA per play. But I said here, I did it. Look, this is the most accurate ranking of Purdy by EPA per play. You just have to know how to adjust it correctly. And and it turns out it's 90% to Shanahan. So I think if you agree that that's reasonable, then I think we are on the same page. Like the numbers and your film watching eyes kind of are in agreement. And if you think that that's a little too far, then you're really stuck with Purdy as a top 10 quarterback. It's just there's just no way around it. Probably top 8, top 6. So I mean, there's really not much left to say about the 49ers, except that they aren't winning the close games. Their window is swiftly closing. They haven't had the injury luck that they've had in previous seasons. They really are going to need to rely on these older rookies that they drafted to come and step up like Pearsall.
Yeah, and what'll be interesting in the longer time horizon with Purdy's contract and everything else coming into play is like the somewhat underplayed ingredient to the success of the Patriots over a long period of time. Again, there wasn't a lot of we're in our window. We're in our window here. We're in our 2-year window here. There was none of that sort of talk. Like they consistently were letting players walk, and we just still don't see teams do that very, very often. So like again, we haven't seen the 49ers do that with anyone. We're just kind of like re-upping everybody as far as what's gonna happen. And now, it's not their fault with Ayuk now being injured for the season, but that's something they're gonna have to carry, a larger cap hit, or you're losing your low cap hit season with
Did they get insurance on him? I don't know. They were a big insurance team. I don't know.
Maybe they did. So we'll see on that. But you get my larger point, which I think is funny about the whole discussion, though. When you talk about, I know you have your your film watchers that you're getting paid by under the table, but like I've read the funniest thing about this season, the two takes that I've seen a lot of is one from film watchers. Purdy is like bad because he's throwing into a bunch of tight windows. Like that's bad.
That one killed me. It killed.
That was a great one.
She'll actually, Capetta, he actually lost his shit on Steven Ruiz in the podcast. It was fantastic.
And now the flip side of this, I saw from Ruiz's former colleague Ben Solak when he was writing about Lamar Jackson this year is he said Lamar Jackson is throwing to wide open receivers all the time. And that's a feather in the cap of Jackson because he's choosing to not throw into coverage. And it's like, okay, like there's an element of that. I'll give you there's an element of that. But again, this is why I kind of like the stats. And I say, when you throw to wide open guys, like the real factor you're getting in both of those situations is my adjustments, which people don't like, when they come to Lamar Jackson, are going to tell them, you know what, he's getting a lot of yak this year, so I'm adjusting him down a bit, where everyone wants to adjust Lamar Jackson up for all that he does. And then for Purdy, they're actually going to adjust him up a little bit because he's not getting the yak. I agree. all these individual circumstances, you can build a lot of nuance into everything. I don't know if anyone does it that well, and this is just an example of it. That we're being told to go to the exact opposite side of what our intuition would tell when it comes to throwing to covered receivers or not in these two circumstances. Maybe there's some truth to it, but I guess I'd always lean towards the default of sticking with our intuition in those circumstances.
Well, there was a fascinating moment in the 49ers Chiefs game where both quarterbacks had 2 interceptions. They both looked terrible, and both of them had their wide receivers out. And it was a moment where your priors really showed. Like, if you didn't like Purdy, this was all the reason you needed to kind of confirm all of your biases about him, where you would then at the same time kind of have to, because you probably like Mahomes. I mean, one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. You have to look past all of the exact same issues happening on the other side of the ball with Patrick Mahomes. I am just moving on to the Chiefs a little bit here. I am super, super frustrated with this offense going on a year and a half now, and they can't keep getting away with it, is all I can think. There's going to be a point where he has to become more like he used to be. You cannot win with him trucking Mustafa in the end zone for a touchdown. Like, that is just, that's not how the Chiefs are going to three-peat. So coming off a bye, putting up a stinker on offense, at least through the passing game, like they did this week, was shocking to me. I am looking for something much, much better out of that Chiefs offense. They just have to find a way to get him going. It's been going. I mean, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in October, Mahomes. So, I mean, this needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of interesting, right? Because if we're going to pick two offensive minds, quote unquote, right? You know, two offensive minds over the last 10 years, definitely. Maybe even the legendary, how legendary they've become. You know, we're starting to look at maybe no one other than, you know, Bill Walsh over the last 40 years would really reach there. It would probably be Andy Reid and now Kyle Shanahan, or the larger Shanahan-y whatever system, if you want to group everyone into that mix right there. And they're both struggling, I think, right? I mean, how can you not say that's the case? And what I think was interesting about Mahomes, and maybe this is part of like the MVP discussion, where, well, it's a little bit of a moot point because now Lamar Jackson is leading in MVP odds after Monday night. But before Monday night, before that game, Mahomes was leading in MVP odds, and Adam Levitan, who I love, over at Establish the Run. So I got to get some plugs in here too, so I got to be able to plug somebody. He was pointing out the paucity of positive stats when it came to Patrick Mahomes this year. Although he didn't name Patrick Mahomes, he just said this quarterback is ranked so, you know, in the 20s in QBR and middle of the league in this, and is barely throwing any yards per game, has, you know, more interceptions than touchdowns. Isn't it something crazy like that this year of what's going on? But his team is 6-0 and he's leading the MVP race. And of course, that was Patrick Mahomes. So I guess the question is, like, how much should we, and I think this is being built into to things like the MVP market where he's still second, how much should we be expecting him to turn things around? Like, if I gave you a bet today and I said, will Patrick Mahomes from here out to the rest of the season be a top 3 quarterback in EPA per play, would you take that? Would that be a tipping point? Would I have to go down to top 5? Would I have to go down to top 8? Like, what do we expect from him going forward? Because I think the market's still expected to be pretty high, like in that top 3 sort of area. And I don't know if I disagree. I'm kind of two minds, because I think emotionally I disagree, but maybe quantitatively I shouldn't disagree with that.
I think he's of the archetype that is the Aaron Rodgers in his fallow period, in his blue period, those 2 years where, you know, Ben Baldwin and others made a lot of hay talking about how he was washed. And I think we're going on a year and a half of Mahomes being that in his blue period. And just
Mahomes is washed? Mahomes is
no,
washed, Josh Hermsmeyer said.
No. When analytics guys like me and Ben would clown Rodgers and say, look, he hasn't been good for a long time, you guys. At
no longer elite, I think was the exact title from there.
No longer elite. And so I think we can honestly say the last year and a half, Mahomes has not been elite except in the playoffs.
Can I say one thing with Mahomes just real quick?
Yeah.
You know, I looked up the beginning of last year because I wanted to compare year over year through week 6, though. So I didn't look through week 7. I I was shocked. He was first in the NFL in EPA per play through the first 6 weeks. I kind of forgot about that. He just
He had a
went
3 touchdown game. Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
But
it just went to hell during the middle of the season and kind of into the end of the season, and then it picked back up again. So if you're looking at the trajectory of what he's done, it was like really, really good in 2022, good the first third of 2023, really bad the second third of 2023, kind of bad at the end of the regular season, really awesome again in the playoffs, and now bad again. So it's kind of multiple iterations up and down here.
Yeah. No, I look at the whole season. So, average together, the EPA per play was trash, and it's continued this year. But I would bet he would be top 5 from here on out. And I think that's partially the schedule. I think it's partially they just have to figure it out. I think it's going to be the case that he's going to start pushing the ball down the field more. Like one of his interceptions, his guy fell down. And it was right after he almost hit for a long pass, but he overthrew the fastest wide receiver on his team. They're just not hitting, and I think those kind of things will even out. That bad luck or that bad performance over what you would expect is going to even out, and he'll become more like himself on plays like that. And if that's the case, we're obviously not going to see as many 0 passing touchdown days as we've seen recently. We'll probably get a smattering of 2, and maybe he'll even finish the season with a crescendo of 3 touchdown passing games. And if that's the case, then yes, given the passing environment in the league this year, that would put him near the top.
Yeah, I mean, he's also been, defensively, he's had a defense that's been like in the top 5 or 6 in the NFL, like unadjusted. And I think if you adjust for strength of schedule, they've been a little bit better than that. And especially better in the past than versus the run. So you can also like factor that in if you're thinking about a team that's playing from ahead a lot. So they're probably even really better. Like they're probably been a top 3 type of defense over the last 2 years. So he has that. The running game has actually been pretty good this year for them also. Obviously it's highly variable when it comes to things like some of these, the few times that Andy Reid goes for it on 4th down, but those sorts of conversions are converting near the goal line. So he has had those 2 factors working towards him. But yeah, no, I think he's going to turn it around, and I don't really have any quibbles with them being the leader right now when it comes to Super Bowl odds and things like that, especially with a couple of games over the Ravens. But it'll be interesting looking at those 2 teams going forward, because the Ravens defense has not really been that good so far this year, even if the running game and the passing game have been pretty excellent.
Boy, but they have been excellent, haven't they? And that one Lamar pass to Bateman, that was beautiful. Like that's the best pass I've seen out of him, Lamar I'm talking about, in a long time. And the route by Bateman was wonderful too, and completely juked the quarterback out of his shorts. So I mean, I think, well, along with Derrick Henry being Derrick Henry, which I was a little skeptical that he was going to be the same Derrick Henry. I thought people were kind of like, oh, he's going to be wearing black. It's going to look so cool. And, like, there's a lot of vibes going on there. But, man, he has been different. Like, those long runs are game-changing. Like, I grew up loving the running game. Like, it was only until I figured out, like, what won games that I started hating it. But Derrick Henry's a winning runner. Like he wins you games with his legs just because of how explosive he is. And so anyway, I've been enjoying watching Derrick Henry and the Ravens and their offense. And I think if they can continue to play like they have, the defense and Zach Orr can take his time to figure it out. But I agree with you. It has not been good. The brain drain on the defensive side of the ball in Baltimore has shown itself pretty clearly. Yeah, but they're the favorite to win the Super Bowl at this point, aren't they? I think they are.
No, I think the Chiefs still are, because they have the inside track to the number 1 seed. I presume in that bye. But from a power ranking sort of standpoint, yeah, I think they're probably seen close to team strength. But the Chiefs have already banked a couple of games that they have not. What's interesting about the defense, and again, this is probably a little bit element of this is a strong element of confirmation bias. You mentioned the brain drain. Again, like research from the past, which I have not replicated, so I don't know if this is true or not, and it's probably 10 years old at this point, at least, if not 15, that Brian Burke had done on defenses. He couldn't find a quarterback for the defense when it came to a player coming in or leaving and its effect on the offense. But the defensive coordinator, at least for highly performing defenses, when that defensive coordinator had left, he did see something there. And there's at least a temporary like readjustment sort of period that goes on there. So you might be onto something when it comes to the brain drain in Baltimore.
And it wasn't just the defensive coordinator; it was two other guys as well. They just had to go deep down the bench to find Orr. And I'm not saying Orr is terrible. I think he's just learning, right? And luckily, he's learning with the best offense Baltimore has trotted out there since at least, I mean, maybe 2019. It was this good. They had, I think, their yards per play were outrageous that year. That was Lamar in his
Yeah. That's
absolute
one
prime.
thing I don't know I don't know what my opinion is. Like 2019 Lamar Jackson versus this year Lamar Jackson, when everyone's saying he's playing his best ever. I don't know, man. That 2019, I just remember watching it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like they're just
Yeah.
going for like 50 yards, yard plays all the time.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts. But anyway, he's got this great environment to learn in. And then back to the Chiefs about them being Super Bowl favorites. I don't know. I think for them to become the team they need to be, they need to lose. Does that sound weird? Like I
Yes.
remember when the
So this sounds
49ers.
like your guy Boogers we're too close to the end zone, so we need to lose some yards to have some more space near the
I
end zone.
remember in 1994, the San Francisco 49ers played the Eagles and they got blown out, and Seifert benched Steve Young and he threw a fit on the sideline. And from then on, I think they went undefeated. At least they went on a string of wins. And a bunch of people on the team credited that as the turning point of the season. They were good, but they weren't a Super Bowl team. And then they finally got it together after that. I feel like Kansas City, they need to do something to change this offensive, philosophy, makeup, the vibe there. And I think if they lose, it'll be I think it'll shake them enough that they will try something a little bit different. Because I think right now, what is this? Kansas City.
This is Ben B. Baldwin here.
Okay.
Just market implied odds from Bovada for chances to win the Super Bowl or win the conference. So this means winning the
16 to
conference.
13%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
So it's
more,
not
I
the
think
number one seed. It's to make it so. But you can tell that they think the Ravens are a better team in some ways because the like differentials between Kansas City winning the AFC versus the Super Bowl. They look better when it comes to winning the AFC versus the Ravens, but the Ravens look, are relatively better when it comes to winning the Super Bowl, or there's not as big of a gap, which
Right.
implies they have a higher team strength, right? It implies that they win more often conditionally if they make the Super Bowl, but they're not going to get to the Super Bowl as often because they're less likely to have the number one seed.
Right, because early wins still count and early losses.
Yes, because all these things can win, and there's only one bye team, and the Kansas City it's got the inside track on that, at least as far as it goes now. Now Detroit is third in this, above San Francisco by both measures, which I think makes sense. I saw some people complaining about San Francisco being fourth by this measure, but I think that's a product of the fact that, like I mentioned, that they could potentially get things turned around, and they're not far back when it comes to their division. Their division is not good, whereas the best teams in the NFC, the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, and then you throw the Bears in there as being pretty decent. Like that's just a gauntlet of games they're going to have to go through, which is going to make it really, really difficult. One of those teams is not going to make the playoff. Like one or two of those teams are not going to make the playoffs. So that makes it a little bit more difficult there. And I think that's where San Francisco gets a bit of a boost.
Yeah, I just wonder, so much of this. I was listening to Todd Monken talk, and this is kind of indicative of a lot of these teams right now and their potential, what we should expect moving forward. I think Monken has a firm idea that, like, what we just did, what we we put up these points. That doesn't mean we're going to put up points next week. That's been his focus. I think that's how his coach has to think. But I think they feel like they've been really fortunate. Like, you don't plan on Derrick Henry getting 80-yard runs every game, and yet he continues to do it. At some point, you feel like it's going to catch up to you. I feel like that has to be how the Vikings are feeling. I think that's what my point about the Chiefs is. I think they need to lose so that they can kind of reassess certain things. And then also not feel like you're just coasting on some kind of luck. Like, just seem to be getting it done with vapor. It's not true. They have a great defense, and their run game, as you mentioned, is very good. But you're not going to win without Mahomes actually putting up numbers. And so I just think a lot of this is going to shake out in the next few weeks. I think we're going to see teams like Minnesota drop out. Either Houston's going to become great or they're going to drop out. Green Bay, what the hell are they? I think Buffalo's starting to move up. Detroit seems real. I mean, but there's a lot of this. There's still a lot of uncertainty in this, in these rankings and these, and how these teams are going to perform moving forward, I think.
No, well, here's a team I want to talk about. Maybe this is the last team we'll talk about before we have to get out of here. Where if you're betting on uncertainty, right? If you're buying, some options, you're trying to buy some options here, live off of that uncertainty for what may happen going forward. What do you think about the Eagles? Because remember last year their defense was trash. This year their defense has been about league average-ish. They've been working without, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith for a while. They got AJ Brown back. He's been very productive these last couple of games there. They have a team that, went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They're still only seen as maybe a slightly better than average team this year, but the NFC East is trash, like real trash. So their schedule going forward, it's, a bottom 5 schedule because Dallas is so bad. And, Washington, if there is a team that's going to fade potentially, that could be a little bit of fool's gold, including with a potential injury. And if injuries, if more starts to happen there with Jaden Daniels, would be the Commanders potentially. I don't know. I'm kind of interested in the Eagles for what they may be able to do this year in an environment where we don't have any offensively and defensively dominant teams.
Yeah. I think they need to, again, a little bit like the Chiefs, need to get their passing game going. I mean, if anything not to AJ Brown doesn't seem to be working right now. Slim Reaper is just not doing anything. I think he had like one catch this past week. But when you got Saquon going crazy and it's a revenge game, I guess, you can make excuses for all that. But I think there's a reason why they're ranked as a mid team. But I agree with you. In terms of just uncertainty and variance. Yeah, their schedule's good. Is Daniel Jones benched? Was it just the game was out of hand?
He was
protecting
benched.
him?
He was benched. I mean, whatever that you want justification you want to put into it, but he was not injured or anything like that. He was benched.
Right. But I mean, is the justification that the game was out of hand? We're just protecting him, because that's a completely different.
They needed a spark.
Posture.
I heard a spark, a potential spark.
Okay. Yeah. So it's complete trash, that division. But my Chargers just lost to a complete trash team in Arizona. So I mean, who knows what's going on?
Yeah, well, Kyler got that, got he's scampering out there and doing pretty well. Yeah, you're right. It was weird. when I was doing my reviews for so this is not a sustainable offense, but when you're playing the Jets, maybe, when you're playing the Giants, maybe it is sustainable. I was doing my reviews and I saw that AJ Brown had, I don't remember what it was, like 80 something passing yards. But then I looked up and they only had like 110 passing yards total in the team. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty good share. That's like 80% share he's getting of the market there, despite the fact that he's not even close to getting 100 receiving yards.
Yeah. But I saw Solak, he found a throw that Herbert sent a thrill up his leg, an impossible 99 percentile throw.
Wait, do you like the Chargers or not? You're not in on Justin Herbert?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I feel like if he's that good of a player, he would overcome the lack of wide receiver talent on the team, and he's just not. In terms of winning, in terms of scoring touchdowns. But then I go, you know what? He's got Greg Roman as an offensive coordinator. What am I thinking? Like that's like trying to go to a knife fight with both hands tied behind your back. So their red zone stuff is really bad. They're really injured in the wide receiving core, but they knew they didn't have depth there going into the season. So I guess, what do you expect? I guess where I'm a little disappointed is that they couldn't put anything offensively together against a trash Arizona team. They couldn't stop James Conner on the ground, which is something that you would expect to see out of a Jim Harbaugh defense. And 150 yards, it's not how you're going to win. They allowed touchdowns and kicked field goals, and you're just not going to win a game that way.
Yeah, I'll say the one reason I'm getting a little bit more positive, perhaps, on the Chargers, despite the fact that they've lost 3 out of their last 4, is, I mean, at least he's dropping back to pass. He was barely doing anything before. His dropbacks by game, 28, 22. I mean, what is this, 1984? 20 week 3, 29, and then 38 and 43 these last 2 games, where he's been efficient these last 2 games. So I'm happy that maybe Harbaugh has been forced out of his you run the damn balledness. So I guess despite the losses, I'm they could be pretty good going forward.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in once again. We'll be back at you next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Go to airyards.com, go to unexpectedpoints.com, subscribe there. Follow us on Twitter. If you have any more questions, you can go ahead and shoot them over to me on Twitter, or if you're subscribed to the Substack, if you just reply to anything that comes through via the Substack on email, I end up getting those emails and I'll reply to you there. Otherwise, I'll be talking to you guys next time. Thanks so much.